everyone, and happy Saturday. This week on Beachcombers, we're going to talk about some of the things that animals leave behind. In front of me, we have a collection of feathers and bones and shells and baleen, and so we're going to take the time to talk about each of those. Just wanted to mention, as always, we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. And George is here to say hello too.
George may need to join us.
Oh no, he's not interested in that right now.
So this week, with everything that's been going on in the world, we thought it was important to not only share with you our normal kind of beachy type content, but also to kind of look at some of the importance behind some of the objects that you might find on the beach. More so than just their biological significance, and more so than just what you might think is really cool to find. So today our curriculum from BC is the positive self-cultural identity, and also looking at others' cultural identities. And so today we really, we're not going to get into political issues, we're not going to unpack a bunch of things that are going on in different parts of the world, and we encourage you to look into those yourself, and there's tons of amazing content on YouTube or other places that you can read about all of this. But we do want to encourage you to think about what we find significant in our own culture, and recognize that that is no more significant than something like an eagle feather that we're going to talk about today to a First Nations culture or something like that. And so really have that in your mind as we go through some of these things. Some of these things are just neat and we're going to show them to you because they're cool, and other things do have cultural significance, and we'll talk about those things as well. You'll also notice today, of course, we are inside. It is very windy outside today, and we just thought the wind noise is just going to be a pain in everyone's behind. So we are inside again. We've set up our dining room lab, and so let's get to it.
So the first specimen we're going to talk about is a fishbone. This one right here, it's actually quite a large fishbone as fish go. Our guess is that it's probably, excuse me, George.
Play with the feathers.
Yeah, no, those feathers aren't toys. Our guess is that it's either from a large salmon or a large bottom fish, given the size of this bone. This one was just found along the beach, and you'll come across them quite often, usually in the form of a long spine with a whole bunch of these lined up beside each other with the spokes or spines going up to each side.
And the spines are actually called vertebral processes.
Thank you,
That's
Emily.
the real word for them.
Yes. So yeah, this one likely belonged to a large salmon or bottom fish. Oh.
So this is this very odd shaped bone is also a vertebrae, and this is the incredible thing about vertebrae. Is Jillian just showed you the fish vertebrae, and this is also still a vertebrae. This vertebrae is from the cervical vertebrae of a gray whale, and your cervical vertebrae are right up, right kind of where your neck meets your skull. And so it's a very funny shaped bone. This is like almost like a handle on it. And so these would stack very close together. No, you can't have those feathers. They would stack very, very close together in that part of the whale. And in us, and also in belugas, these are the only animals that can move their head this way or this way. There's flexibility in these. In the larger whales, and even in things like dolphins and porpoises, they can move like this, but they can't move like this. So they can't move their head individually, and that's based on their cervical vertebrae and how much cartilage is between those vertebrae and what that will allow for movement.
So Emily showed you a vertebrae from the neck of a gray whale. This one is from the tail. This is a caudal vertebrae. You'll notice that it's very round. There's no vertebral processes, and there isn't that handle like the last one had. And as you get nearer and nearer to the tail of the gray whale, they will get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it's interesting to mention, this bone, it's very, very porous. It's kind of sponge-like, although it is brittle. And this is common in all whale bone. This is because it would be filled with oil while the whale is alive, and this helps the animal stay buoyant. And so this bone is going to be very porous, as will most marine mammal bones, just to help them be a little bit lighter as they're traveling through the water. They don't need that bone density like they do if they lived on land. Another thing that's interesting to mention is that while this is from a gray whale, which is one of the larger baleen whales, but by no means the largest, This bone, you can see how large it is. We have a bone from a blue whale at the museum, another vertebrae, that is about this high and that big around. It is a monstrous bone. We all know that the blue whale is the largest animal to live on the planet, but sometimes we do forget just how big they are.
So hopefully you've seen our stellar sea lion video from a couple weeks ago where we looked at a dead sea lion that was at Neck Point Park. Well, this here is from a stellar sea lion. This is a scapula, also known as a shoulder blade. Oh, George, you can't have those. And so you can feel your own shoulder blade. If you reach back and roll your shoulder around, you can feel that shoulder blade. And your shoulder blade is maybe a quarter of the size of this one. This is huge. It's thin like a fan, and it has this here, which is where you have muscle attachment in these animals' fins, which helps them swim and helps them walk. And so this is a huge, huge scapula, but of course something like a whale would have a much larger scapula, like a blue whale scapula you could easily sit on. It's massive. But most scapulas are around the same shape except giraffe scapulas, which are rectangular and they don't have this fan shape. And this is a common misconception. If you see this on the beach, you might think it's a flipper because it's about the same shape. But the flipper bones actually have individual fingers inside of them, just like we do here as humans, or as your dog does, has individual toes on his paw. If you look at something like the Whale Interpretive Center, or even if you just Google it, you'll see even whales inside their flippers have fingers. Now this is not true for their flukes or their tail flippers, which are just a big sheet of cartilage essentially. Obviously there's muscle there, there's blood vessels, all those types of things, but there's no bone in the tail. And that's why for something like this guy here, that the caudal vertebrae, the end of the spine, the vertebrae just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and end in a little point. There's no tailbone, which is a common misconception when people see these. So these are crab shells, and these are really interesting specimens. This guy's really cool because you can still see his little mouthpieces here. I'll go a little closer, you can see them, which is so cool. So he'd use that to eat. This guy, those are broken off. These are two different species. They're not just a bigger one and a smaller one. This is a Dungeness, and this is a red rock crab. Dungeness crabs are your #1 eating crab on the Pacific Northwest. If you order crab from a restaurant, it could be something like king crab or snow crab, which is imported, but if you're getting crab that was caught in this area, it's likely to be Dungeness. People do eat red rock crab as well, but they are smaller, and so you need more of them to get a meal essentially. There's also restrictions on what size these animals have to be in order for you to take them. And so we have to, if we put down a crab trap, we do have to measure. And when we come up, and for a Dungeness, that's from this point to this point. And so you have to measure this length here. And so with the red rock crab, obviously those are going to be different measurements. These crabs are both important parts of the ecosystem. It's a real treat to find whole crab shells on the beach. You usually find fragments of them, or maybe just one claw. We have one claw right here, one lonely claw. And so to find these guys in their full form is actually pretty cool. So this is our last of our shell category. This is a moon snail shell, and moon snails are a really neat animal. So it's a big, big snail shell, similar to what you would find in your garden, except much bigger. And this might look like something that like a mermaid would hold like this or something like this, but these guys are fierce predators. These guys actually hunt bivalves, things like clams or mussels, and they hunt in a very interesting way. They have a piece, so obviously the animal would live in here, and the soft part of the animal would live in here, but they have a piece of their body that's kind of like a tooth that they've turned into a drill. And so they drill through the hole, they drill a hole into the clam shell. So if you ever find on the beach, and we have a bunch of them at the Whale Interpretive Center, but we don't have one here unfortunately. If you ever find a clam shell and it's got a perfect little round hole the size of like the tip of a Q-tip kind of thing, that kind of size, that's these guys drilling a hole in the shell, sucking out the animal that they're eating. So these guys are incredible predators, and they're actually pretty speedy. The other thing that's neat about these guys is their eggs. when they lay their eggs, they lay them in what's called a collar, and it looks like a piece of rubber. You might even think you should throw it away. You might think it's litter, but it's not. And it looks like a shirt collar. It looks just like this. Imagine if I cut this piece of fabric off my fleece. And they lay their eggs in that shape. And they're very neat looking. They're kind of a charcoal gray color. And so moon snails are fascinating creatures, as well as leaving beautiful things for us to find behind.
Alright, so we're going to start talking about things made from keratin. This is our baleen and our feathers. And so baleen is very interesting. It's found in most of the larger whales. Things like humpback whales, gray whales, blue whales are all going to have baleen. It's going to be what they use to feed. It's what they have instead of teeth. So this specimen is from a gray whale. You can see individual sheets of baleen in here. They all line up parallel to each other. And how the whales use them is they take a big mouthful of small schooling fish, things like Pacific herring or krill. Krill is not a fish, it's like a small shrimp, but it does travel in large schools and is the main food of many large species of baleen whale. And what they do is they take the big mouthful of fish, then they use their tongue to press all the water out the sides of their mouth and press all of the fish against the baleen, against this smooth stringy part. The fish or krill gets caught in there and then they just swallow that. So it's a very efficient way to hunt a lot of prey.
So last but not least, we're going to talk about our feathers. So feathers are one of the most common things that you might find in a park or on a beach. And broadly, there are two types of feathers. There are feathers like this that are found on the wings called flight feathers that have this big thick stalk, and these would have been used in olden times for quill and pen. They have a big hollow stalk that you could have filled with ink. And so here we have a Canada goose feather, we have a seagull feather, we have a barred owl feather, which is beautiful and a little bit more rare. We also have a Steller's jay feather. This was from the campground in Telegraph Cove. You can see it's this beautiful navy color, matches my sweater very nicely. And so those are kind of on the exterior of the bird or on the wings. And then we also have these kind of more fluffy type feathers, and these are found underneath the exterior feathers that would provide some waterproofing or that kind of thing, or they're also found in juveniles and they're more for insulation. So these feathers we have, and we can take these feathers no problem, but not all feathers are like that. Some feathers have special rules around them, and in Canada those are bald eagle feathers. Any part of a bald eagle that you find on the beach, whether that's feathers, beak, bones, talons, feet, anything like that, you have to leave on the beach. And that's actually required by law. You can face large fines or even jail time if you try and sell these pieces. And this is because these birds and their parts are of extreme religious, cultural, and spiritual significance to First Nations peoples. And so out of respect for these pieces, we make sure to leave these pieces on the beach where we found them. Now, the Whale Interpretive Center has three taxidermied bald eagles, and it also has a bald eagle skeleton, an articulated skeleton, which we did a Facebook post about recently. And Jillian's done a lot of work on that skeleton to get it back in ship shape. But we have permits for everything that we have in the Whale Interpretive Center, because you must have a permit for animal parts that you are showing to people. And so, you couldn't just say like, hey, I'm going to start my own museum in my basement and just collect up pieces from the beach and then charge an admission to show people. That's not okay. So you have to have permits, and we have permits for everything, but we have special permits for our eagles. They require extra permits than just, our whale bones say. And these are really important permits because they prove that we did not kill those eagles for the purpose of display, which would be illegal to kill a species that's not like a hunting species. It's not like something like a moose that you can get a moose tag and go hunt, but also because they are of such significance to First Nations peoples. It would be seen as a sacrilege to be shooting at an eagle, or killing an eagle, or selling eagle parts. There would be I'm sure you can think of a equivalent in something like a Christian faith, for example, that would be sacrilege, and something, messing with church grounds or anything like that would be just feel really a lot worse than maybe regular vandalism, say on somewhere else. It really hits harder when it's of spiritual significance to people, and that's the same with bald eagle parts here, is that it's not just that they're a feather, it's the significance that these have been used in First Nations, coastal First Nations practices for thousands of years in regalia, which is the fancy dress used for dances and potlatches and other events, and in all sorts of other ceremonies. And so we encourage you, if you think you found something with bald eagles parts in it, take a picture if you're on the beach or that kind of thing to remember it, but don't take it home. It's for your own good as well, and also just recognizing that cultural significance around that.
So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you enjoyed our video. We hope to see you next week, and hope you have a great weekend.
And stay safe, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.